Your accountant just told you it was your best year ever. So why does checking your bank account feel like playing Russian roulette? A lot of business owners are running a company that looks great on paper, but in real life, they're living paycheck to paycheck. And that reason has nothing to do with how hard they're working. In this video, I'll show you the exact moment your profit turns into someone else's cash. Why a loan payment, a slow paying customer, or an expense you didn't think twice about are all things that keep you trapped underwater. I'll show you why the accountant who tells you you just had your best year might be the last person to warn you this was coming. And I'll show you the one number you should be checking instead of your bank balance so you never get caught off guard by your own business again. I'm Daniel, and I help business owners stop overpaying the IRS every year, keep more of their profits, and finally start putting money into their own accounts. A car's odometer tells you how far you've traveled. The fuel gauge tells you if you're about to run out of gas or not. A business owner staring at a great year-end P&L statement is reading the odometer. Meanwhile, the bank account, which is the fuel gauge, is sitting on E. Both are true at the same time. So let's talk about exactly what's happening here. Your business, it has two scoreboards, and most business owners only look at one. The first scoreboard is your P&L statement, your profit and loss statement. That's the one your accountant pulls up to determine if you've had a good year or not. It shows the revenue and the expenses. If you have more revenue than expenses, then on that scoreboard, it shows that you've won. The second scoreboard is your bank account, and that one's telling a completely different story. Here's why. Your P&L statement counts revenue the moment you earn it, the moment the work is done, the moment the invoice goes out, not the moment the money actually lands. So, in your best year ever, you could have hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting on that first scoreboard, but that's outstanding money that hasn't made it to your bank account. And your bills, those don't wait for the money to catch up. Look, the P&L statement was built to answer one question. Did the business model work? Is there more coming in than going out over time? It's a great question. It's just not the question that needs answered on the Friday before payroll. The more important question is, do you have the cash? And if nobody's ever shown you the gap between those two numbers, if you've been running your business off just one scoreboard, you've essentially been driving by the odometer and ignoring the fuel gauge completely. The miles look great, you just don't know if you're about to run out of gas or not. So if the business is earning money, where is it actually going? There are three places most owners never think to look. The first is your receivables. You did the work, you sent the invoice, your P&L says you've made the money, but the client's on a net 30, net 60, or maybe even a net 90. That cash hasn't moved yet, and in the meantime, you've got a business to run. The second is owner draws. If you're an LLC or a sole proprietor, when you pull money out of the business, that draw doesn't show up as an expense on your P&L. It just quietly leaves the bank. So you can have a profitable month on paper and have pulled out more than the business actually collected yet. You're spending tomorrow's cash today. The third one, and this one surprises almost every business owner I talk to, is your loan payments. Here's the thing. Only the interest portion of your loan payment shows up on your P&L. The principal amount, that just comes straight out of your bank account every single month without ever touching your profit number. So you could have a $3,000 monthly loan payment and your P&L only sees the $200 of it. The other $2,800 is gone, invisible on the one report you're actually checking. Here's the bottom line. The business isn't bad at making money. It's that there's no distinction being made between what the business earns and what the business actually has. And when you blur that line, when you're spending and drawings based on what the P&L says instead of what actually is in your account, you're overexposing yourself with zero buffer, zero flexibility, and one slow month or one unexpected expense, and you're in trouble. Most business owners have never had anyone actually walk them through this because their CPA is doing a great job at looking backwards. They're reconciling, they're filing, and they're keeping the IRS happy. But nobody's sitting down and mapping where the cash actually goes. That's a different conversation, and it's one most business owners desperately need. Let's go through a simple example. Say you land a solid contract. Let's say it's a $40,000 job. Work starts on Monday. Your crew shows up, materials get ordered, subcontractors get paid. 4 weeks later, the job's done. You send the invoice, and your client, who's a good client and pays every time, there's no issues there. They're on a net 60. That $40,000 hits your P&L the day you send the invoice, but it doesn't hit your bank account for another 2 months. And in those 2 months, payroll runs, rent's due, the next job needs materials before the one's been paid for. That's not a bad business. That's a cash flow problem wearing a profitability mask. And it happens to more businesses than you think. The JP Morgan Chase Institute looked at hundreds of thousands of small businesses and found that half of them only have enough cash on hand to cover about 27 days of expenses. Not a slow quarter, not a bad year. 27 days. That's just a little less than a month. That's the median and the middle of the pack. So, if you've ever felt like you're one slow month away from a real problem, you probably were, and you're not alone. So, here's where to start. Pull up the last 2 to 3 months of expenses. Grab your bank statement and look through them line by line. It doesn't have to be perfect. Now start sorting your expenses into 2 buckets. The first, fixed costs. The stuff that runs every single month no matter what. Rent, salary, software, insurance, etc. That's your baseline. That number runs whether you land the job or not. Then your variable costs. And here's where it gets interesting. Split those into 2 categories. Business level variable costs, the things that fluctuate but aren't tied to a specific job, and job specific costs, the materials, subcontractors, mileage, permits, anything that only shows up because of a particular job. Now ask yourself one question. Are those job specific costs showing up on your invoices? Or are you eating the costs? Because if you're eating that cost, then you're not invoicing correctly. That's money you should have earned and never collected. And that gap right there is one of the clearest places the profit disappears before it ever becomes cash. Now that you've gone through those statements, get those numbers in front of you. Build your invoice around what the job actually costs. It's not complicated, but it does take a little bit more time because knowing your numbers well enough to charge for them is going to make sure you fill those gaps and not miss out on that potential profit. Because you don't fix a profitable but broke with a mindset shift. You fix it with real numbers. And those numbers can be found in your last 90 days of expenses. And if you just ran the math in your head and didn't love what you found, you're not alone. That's exactly the kind of thing we work through together. Your numbers, your business, your specific situation. Not theory, not a generic spreadsheet, your actual cash flow mapped out so it finally makes sense. So let's get back to the fuel gauge for a second. Remember, this is your bank account. The odometer's been looking great. Revenue's up, the P&L is strong, the accountant's happy. But the fuel gauge, the actual cash position of the business, has been running low for a while. And the problem with the fuel gauge that's always low is that you never have room to breathe. You can't take on a big job that requires upfront material. You can't float a slow month. You can't handle an equipment breakdown without reaching for a credit card or a line of credit. That's not freedom. That's survival mode with a good-looking P&L. So here's what checking the fuel gauge actually looks like. First, the business needs a cash reserve. It's like the personal emergency fund that you hear about all the time, but this is for your business. A rule of thumb is 3 to 6 months of operating expenses. That's your fixed cost baseline you just built out, multiplied by 3 to 6. That's the number that sits in a separate account, not the operating account, and doesn't get touched unless something goes sideways. And the last part matters. Keep it separate. Because if the reserve is sitting in the same account you're running payroll out of, it's not a reserve. It's just a balance, and it'll eventually get spent. Second, stop managing the business by what's in the bank account today. That number is a snapshot. It doesn't tell you what's coming in next week, what's going out next month, or whether that $40,000 invoice you're waiting on is going to land before or after your next payroll. Managing by today's balance is like checking the fuel gauge only once a week and hoping for the best in between. What you want is a forward-looking view. What's coming in over the next 30, 60 to 90 days, and what's going out. Then find where the gaps are. That's the number that runs the business. It's not the end of year P&L, and it's not the checking account balance on a random Tuesday. And when you're taking draws, when you're pulling money out for yourself, base that on the forward-looking picture, not on a good month that just hit the account. A strong revenue month can create a false sense of security. The cash timing problem we just talked about doesn't care how good last month looked. The business isn't broken. The habit of checking only one number is. And once the fuel gauge gets as much attention as the odometer, the whole thing starts to feel a lot less like Russian roulette. So if your business is sitting somewhere between a great P&L and where did the money go, That's not a you problem. Well, it could be a you problem, but there's a process to fix that problem. And it's something that can be improved and turn your business around. And if this video on cash flow problems hit close to home, you're going to want to watch this video next, because we just talked about what happens when profit and cash get confused. But there's a version of this that's even harder to see coming. A business owner who grew sales, let's say 40%, and still went out of business. Not because the business failed, because it grew too fast for the money to keep up. Click right here to watch that video next.